Heath paints.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Keith Paints. Today, I am painting Nemea. She is a Tiefling Warlock model by Titan Forge Minis, and is available through their Patreon campaign, part of the Titans of Adventure Series 1. Series 2 is already complete, and looks great, and Series 3 is on the way. This video is also part of my Goobertown Roulette Season 2 entry. Check the links in the description for other videos. Back to Nemea. The inspiration for her paint job is based on several things. Her model, 2 randomized Magic the Gathering colors as part of the Goobertown Roulette challenge, and a D&D character I built based on all of that. I also randomized her name. Nemea's colors are blue and black, 2 adjacent colors on the color wheel. Her race is Tiefling and her class is Warlock, both based on her model. So let's start with those colors. What do they tell us? You can dig pretty deep into Magic the Gathering colors, but for our purposes, all we really need to consider is that blue is represented by knowledge and self-improvement, and black is represented by death and self-interest. That is a pretty shallow reading, but it provides enough here because it happens to align perfectly with the Tiefling Warlock. Tieflings are essentially human, but have descended from someone who made a pact with a great demon. They are not inherently evil, but tend to be scorned by humanity for their infernal lineage, so often end up there, which satisfies the black in her color inspiration. And tieflings often need to be very self-reliant, which would go hand in hand with the self-improvement trait of blue. While we're here, I decided not to give her a virtue name. I didn't really like them, and couldn't think of a better one, and had already decided that she would be an urchin, so what does she know of what other tieflings do? I'll also note here that this model does not have a 4 to 5 foot tail as the player's handbook suggests, unless it's hidden. Maybe she lost it when she was an urchin. I haven't decided. As for her class, she is stuck as a warlock. The imp hanging off of her weapon does it. Near as I can tell, only warlocks can summon imps. Warlocks are given their powers through a pact with a powerful patron being of some sort, often fiendish in nature, which seems specifically made for a tiefling. And this feeds into her black color inspiration. Warlocks are also described as being driven by an insatiable need for knowledge, which is a perfect match for her blue color inspiration. Everything just fits so well, and I was able to build a short narrative in my head of her first few levels. I may write a short story about it sometime. Okay, so color inspiration's both double-checked. Let's look at warlocks a little bit closer. You get to choose one of 3 types of patron beings to make a pact with. The Archfey, the Fiend, or the Great Old One. Warlocks also receive a boon for making their pact. The Pact of the Blade might explain her weapon, more on that in a bit, and the Pact of the Tome would explain why she has a book, if they had given her one like the other 3. But the Pact of the Chain allows tieflings to cast Find Familiar as a ritual without using a spell slot. And if I am reading this correctly, only the Great Old One bestows the ability to summon imps through this pact. So I guess she takes the Pact of the Chain for a boon, and a Great Old One for a patron. Which actually works out best. The different types of patron also provide expanded spell options. The Fiend is more suited to a red build, with all its fire spells, and the Archfey suited to a green build, with more nature-oriented spells. Great Old One spells include Detect Thoughts and Clairvoyance, which suit the blue in Nemea's build. As for which specific Great Old One, I don't know them well enough to have decided, but Great Old Ones can be unknowable by nature, so maybe she doesn't really know. One other quick note. Warlocks can only use simple weapons, and she appears to be holding a glaive. In reality, glaives have that kind of blade on a 2-meter shaft, and hers is 1.5 at best. So I'm just going to add a new line right here and call it a light glaive. We'll say 1d8 slashing? Versatile? It is much like a spear, but not really throwable. Finally, in character creation, we have her background. I made her an urchin because I thought it went well with tieflings, and her backstory came to me pretty naturally afterwards, so it must have been the right choice. Urchins have something to remember their parents by. I chose a broken glaive. She doesn't know for sure, but she thinks it was her father's, and he was a great warrior. She could barely lift it, but fended off many attacks with it, and in later years had it attached to a pole with a weight at the other end, so she could swing it around real quick. For her personality trait, I chose the last one, mostly because it seemed like more fun to act out than the others, though some of the others weren't appropriate to her character. She is supposed to be smart and keenly aware of how others see her, so things like eating like a pig and hiding scraps of food she would probably avoid for appearances. I decided her alignment would be chaotic neutral, so of the two ideals here, I chose the low are lifted up and the high and mighty are brought down. Change is the nature of things. This is more suitable than helping those who help her, because as a black-eyed tiefling urchin, nobody helped her. As a warlock, the choice for bond was pretty simple. She owes a debt she can never repay to the person who took pity on her. Except, it wasn't pity. Its motivations can't really be known by simple mortals like us, but it feels more like love than pity. And as for flaws, running away when outnumbered and not fully trusting others is just pragmatic, and she is more likely to play with her target than take an easy kill. The final one aligns perfectly with her black color inspiration. People who can't take care of themselves get what they deserve. Her adventuring partner is Biero Nailo, an elf wizard her patron commanded her to accompany. Why? She can't say, but this elf is rising in power and could provide her some pretty interesting experiences. So let's get painting. After priming with Chaos Black, I painted Abaddon Black onto anything that I actually wanted to be that color. I used Bugman's Glow to base coat all hers and the imp's skin, and White Scar to paint her eyes. I was pretty messy, so I cleaned up with some more Abaddon Black. Tieflings can come in any normal human skin tone, but also in reddish hues. I shaded her skin with Carroburg Crimson, giving the imp 2 coats. I didn't want her to be super red or anything, just sort of red tinted. I also shaded her eyes at the same time, thinking I might make them red, but they didn't look good, so I changed them later. I left the wash to dry and began working on the fabric of her clothes. I like the look of cross-hatching for clothes on fantasy miniatures. I don't think they would have the technology to create really tight weaves, at least not for the common folk, so it seems logical to me that the weave in their garments might be more visible. I started hatching all over with Dark Reaper, and then moved to Thunderhawk Blue and Rust Grey on the raised folds. I cleaned up the edges with Abaddon Black, then gave them a highlight with Thunderhawk Blue. I highlighted her top with the same colors, just didn't cross-hatch it. It is made of leather, dyed the same color as her clothes, so it is shinier. I painted on 4 more layers of successively lighter skin tones on smaller and smaller areas. I used Bugman's Glow mixed with Cadian Flesh Tone, then pure Cadian Flesh Tone, Cadian Flesh Tone mixed with Kislev Flesh, and then pure Kislev Flesh, and I mixed them with Lamian Medium, hoping to make them a little more transparent. I'm still working on doing better gradients, and I think I did an alright job here, but you can't really see any of the red, except maybe a little in the shadows. I was afraid to go over it again with Carroburg Crimson, because I felt like it would be too strong, and I would have to fix it, and I didn't want to put much more work into her skin. I highlighted her boots with Mechanica Standard Grey. The top part is too thick, but the bottom doesn't look so bad. I paint the shaft of her weapon with a Dryad bark, and then mix in some Bugman's Glow to highlight it. I used Rakarth Flesh to base the scroll in her belt, Caliban Green for the round potion, and Jakero Orange for the angular potion bottle. I used Rhinox Hide to base coat her belt and coin purse, as well as the straps on her arms. I mixed some Bugman's Glow into the Rhinox Hide to highlight all the leather, and washed Agrax Earthshade over it, as well as the scroll. At the same time, I quickly gave the eyes a wash of Nuln Oil. I highlighted the orange potion with Troll Slayer Orange and the green potion with Warpstone Glow. Next I went back and painted her jacket the same dyed leather color as her top with Dark Reaper, Thunderhawk Blue, and Rust Grey. For all the metal, I started with a base coat of Leadbelcher. Her weapon is metal at both ends, her pauldrons are metal, her belt buckle and sickle in her belt, the rings at the top of her boots, and some forearm guards being held on by leather straps, and the pendant at her neck. You can see I slipped with the brush here, leaving a huge swath of Leadbelcher on the blue fabric. It mostly came off, thank God. I did not want to have to do that again. Now, the fabric is just a little bit sparkly. I used Nuln oil to shade all the metal, and while it dried, I started out on the base. This piece of pillar is base coated with Xandri dust, as are her horns. After a couple coats of that, I used Mechanicus Standard Grey to base coat the tiles, and washed them with Agrax Earthshade. Then, realizing I missed the leaves, I painted them with Deathguard Green. While the base dries, I used Runefang Steel to highlight all the metal. For her hair, I was going to go for a darker color, but yellow is a complementary color to blue, and she seems like a sassy sort that would bleach or glamour her hair. So I used Averland Sunset, then gave it a wash of Agrax Earthshade. At the same time, I washed her horns with Carroburg Crimson, then tried to get a little more in the edges of her face, especially near the horns. For the imp, I gave him a layer of Corn Red, but it was pretty much the color he already was, so I went back and gave him another layer with Evil Sun's Scarlet. This was bright enough for me. He's not a shiny imp. I also painted his eyes black and tipped his horns with a bit of white, and he looked great. I highlighted her hair with Flash Gitz Yellow, and made her lips a little redder with Evil Sun's Scarlet, I think. I started layering Ushabti Bone onto the broken pillar, and just ended up covering almost all of it, and then rewashing it with Agrax Earthshade. This looked a lot better. I also painted the metal thing on the base, which I had missed earlier. I think I used Balthazar Gold and Leadbelcher for the metal ball. Finally, I highlighted the broken pillar with Screaming Skull and the tiles with Celestar Grey. And Nemea is complete. She is definitely my favorite of the 4 characters I painted as part of this series. Her model, class, and race synced up perfectly with her Magic the Gathering color inspirations, and I was able to imagine her backstory much easier and more completely than any of the others. So what do you think of Nemea, the Tiefling Warlock? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.